The Road to Recovery podcast, an SNJ Today presentation. Watch each week's TV program at snjtoday.com.
After nearly 8 years of drug addiction, Michael De Leon spent 12 years in prison and halfway houses for a gang-related homicide. Since his time in prison, he's dedicated his life to making the world a better place. He is the founder of Steered Straight, which guides young people away from the dangers of drugs and criminal activity. As a motivational speaker, he has spent thousands of hours talking to millions of young adults, and he has worked tirelessly to help people suffering find the road to recovery.
Welcome to the Road to Recovery. I'm Michael De Leon, your host. And part of the mission of Road to Recovery, part of my mission at Steered Straight in my life is obviously prevention, dealing with kids, trying to get them to understand the dangers of drugs. I want to focus on recovery. I want to talk about how many millions of people are recovering from addiction. But we have to address the pandemic that's in our backyards, in our own houses. We've got to talk about this problem in a much more proactive way. And today I have a guest that the story is tragic, but we have to talk about it. And so Debra Banecker has joined us today to talk about her story. And Debra, you lost two daughters to addiction, Sarah and Kelly.
Yes.
And Sarah was 34, and Kelly was 31.
Yes.
Two daughters to addiction. I'm glad you came today, because I've been wanting to talk about the statistics that everyone keeps throwing around and how many people are dying from overdose death. But that's only part of the problem, because Sarah and Kelly, neither died of a drug overdose.
No.
But they died from medical complications related to their drug addiction.
Yes.
So a lot of people want to do safe injection sites to keep people alive in an overdose. That's part of the issue and part of the problem, but it's not going to save these kids, as addiction, as the poison that is in these drugs, the rat poison, the fentanyl, are poisoning these kids' hearts, their arteries, their medical conditions that are developing from drug use.
Yes.
So, where did Sarah and Kelly kind of all begin? Where did it start for them?
Sarah started very young. She was about 15 years old. She started by leaving home early and not coming back. And then she had a child at 17. And she stayed clean the whole time she was pregnant. Left us with the baby. And 2 years later, she came back from Missouri, and she was a drug addict. Camden was too small for her. She took up in Kensington. And Kensington was where she found everything she wanted. All the drugs were on all the corners, all the people, all the ones to do it with. She would come home when she needed sneakers, dry clothes, a place to lay her head, a clean shower. But she would never stay. Throughout all this time, we had her in 19 rehabs.
Oh, wow.
And really, parent-to-parent organization, they were the ones. Cass Foster was the one. She would call me and say, there's not a bed for 6 months. And the next day there was a bed. But you can put them in rehab as many times as you want. Unless they want it, unless they really, really want to stay, they're going to find a way to leave.
Which is why what you always say, we got to get them younger, so this stops.
You have to get them younger. You have to scare them. And I know kids are impressionable, but by the 4th grade, you have to warn them of what happens when they go in your mommy and daddy's medicine cabinet, or they go in the liquor cabinet, or they find pills throughout the house, or grandmom and grandpop live there and they have pills just laying around. Kids will pick them up. Kids will try them as young as 4th and 5th grade. And that's what I always said to myself, don't kid yourself. They're the ones that are trying them. They're the ones that are, so impressionable. And you have to get them younger than 6th grade. By the time they're in 6th grade, they already know about marijuana. They already know about pills and how to get them. And the biggest offender for my Sarah was a hospital in the area. She would walk in and say, "Oh, my wisdom teeth, oh, I hurt my back." And as a minor, without me there, they would write her prescription for 60 Percocets. And they were the biggest offenders of all. Now, I'm sure today they wouldn't do that, because knowing all the, what happens to these kids.
With opioids.
Right, with the opioids, they wouldn't do that today. But years ago, they did that. She would come home with 60 Percocets, and a week later, they'd be gone. And I could tell there was a marked change, and before you know it, she was leaving. And as far as my Kelly goes, Kelly was a productive member of society, worked for a large corporation for 14 and a half years, didn't have a child till she was 26. We thought she had this all ready, all in the bag.
Right.
Until she met somebody on the internet who showed her a different way, who showed her how to chop and snort pills and put them up her nose, and you can hide them from your parents. She was 26. And sometimes I feel like, we should have known. There was no way we could have known. There was just no way. I look at it and I think about it, and her child was 6 years old when she died. And who dies when your child's in kindergarten? And so we lost Kelly first, and 10 months later we lost Sarah. Sarah died of a weakened immune system and HIV and cirrhosis of the liver and Hep C and all the needles and all the times that she put them in her neck and all the times that she overdosed. And she just gave up. Once Kelly was gone, Sarah just gave up. After 2.5 years of clean time, she just decided she didn't want to live anymore. And when they took that hip out, and they gave a known drug addict 21 narcotics, and I am not a nurse, and they sent her to my home, and they left me to take care of her. And I kept a journal, and I wrote every time I gave her a pill down. And the doctor said, you're doing everything right, but I feel like I was wrong. Like they should have contacted me and said, we're sending your daughter to you. No one ever contacted me. No one in the Philadelphia hospital system ever came to me and said, we're going to give you your daughter. She's going to be your responsibility now. From January 2nd of 2016 until February 28th, when she died, I took care of her the best I could, but the immune system was shot. All the needles and all the years of drug use took its toll, and it will take its toll. They will die from this eventually.
And so neither Kelly or Sarah really count in the statistics of those dying from a drug overdose, because it wasn't an overdose, it was a drug-related death. And we'll talk more about the story right after this. Back on the road to recovery, and this story is beyond tragic, and what so many families across our region are dealing with. You're in Camden County, and we talk about Camden City a lot, and we talk about Kensington a lot, and we talk about heroin and this overdose epidemic and people dying of overdose, but neither of your daughters died from an overdose.
No, they died as a direct result of an overdose. My Kelly did die from snorting too many Percocets and Xanax together.
Polydrugs, so you have a benzodiazepine and you have an opioid.
Right.
Snorting them together. It's a deadly combination.
Yes, it is.
And we have doctors now prescribing benzodiazepines to people who, are on opioids or opioid antagonists. You got kids on methadone and doctors are prescribing them benzos. And you got kids on Suboxone and Subutex and doctors prescribing them benzos. And, the FDA just approved both to be used together. It's a deadly combination.
It sure is.
It boggles my mind. And so, what family, can deal with the loss of a child, but you have to deal with the loss of two.
Yes. And we raise their children, and we give them the kind of life that we think our daughters would want to give them.
How many grandkids you have?
10.
Your daughters had 10 kids.
I have 5 daughters.
You have 5 daughters.
And so the 3 that are okay, and then the 2 that weren't. We have 10 grandchildren. They range in age from 8 days to 19 years.
And how many kids does Sarah and Kelly have?
Sarah had 1 and Kelly had 1.
Okay, so you have 2 that you're raising.
Yes.
Which is another problem that we're dealing with. We're not addressing enough grandparents raising their grandkids because their kids are gone.
Yes. And you don't have a choice. What are you supposed to do? There was no way my daughters, well, first, my 19-year-old granddaughter doesn't have a father. And my 9-year-old granddaughter has a father, but he doesn't act like a father. So my husband and I just decided in our 50s we're young enough to do it again. And we'll raise them. And we'll give them the foundation that they need to be strong, healthy people. If you look at my Olivia, who's 19, when she was 5 years old, and Sarah would show up at our back door and need clothes or shoes or a shower, Olivia would come running into us and tell us, "Mommy's hi." It's pretty sad when a 5-year-old knows that her mother's not right. She knew that from a very early age on. Jada never got to know that. Jada was 6.5 when Kelly died. All Jada knows is, Mommy's not here anymore. She doesn't really remember. But we know. Mm-hmm. We know. And grandparents raising grandchildren, there's a lot more than you think. There's a hell of a lot more than what you think.
Right.
I watched the downfall. I begged the girls. I begged them to get help. I begged them to stay at rehab. Kelly never tried rehab. She would never admit she had a problem. But Sarah was in several. And if they don't want that, they will find a way to walk away. They will leave. They will call the closest drug dealer that will come and pick them up. And they will leave on their own. And 2 or 3 days down the road, you get that phone call that every parent dreads.
Right.
That they've left the rehab. And so hard as you might try, it doesn't always work. Just because you want it for them doesn't mean they want it.
Sure.
Doesn't mean they need it.
You never gave up. You never gave up.
I never gave up. We have our local newspaper that ran an article on our family 3 times. And I was always the mom who was waiting for that lost daughter, that one to come home. A couple years ago, I realized she was never coming home. She was going to live out there, and she was going to live out there until she died, until she found her. Drug addicts have a nice, usual way of putting it. They call it their higher power. I call it God. When Sarah found God, Sarah turned her life around. And she had 2.5 years clean, and everything was going as it was supposed to. And me and my husband, have a way of calling it life. The yeast infection set in, and it attacked her hip replacement and got in her bloodstream, and she became septic. And that was all it took.
And 21 narcotics she was on.
Yes.
And she lost her battle to addiction, and now a family is in recovery from the loss of 2 daughters. We'll be back right after this. Back on the road to recovery, and I wish that all I focused on was the great stories and the beautiful stories and people who are recovering from addiction. But I don't think we could talk about recovery without talking about the family who's recovering from loss. And this problem's not getting any better.
No.
It's getting worse.
Yes.
Our numbers and statistics are worse than ever, and they're going in the wrong direction. So, what's your mission now,
My mission now is to be able to reach only that one child, that one kid that's contemplating stealing from his parents, or, taking that pill from his friend, or getting in the school hallway. Because believe me, they can tell you they're not, but they're in every school. Okay, kids may not be selling, like marijuana used to be the thing that they used to sell. They're not selling that anymore. They're selling pills. They're easier to hide. They're easier to take. They're easier to put up their nose. And if you stop just one child, just one, from being able to, get high off that first pill, if you stop that one, that will have been worth it. My daughters will not have died in vain.
Right.
Sarah always wanted to just help one person, male or female. Just, make them see that, you don't need that to enjoy life. You don't need that to enjoy your children, that you can, you can get some kind of satisfaction out of just being yourself.
And we need to get to these kids. We're not educating our kids enough about the consequences and dangers of the addiction.
No, we're not, because they're young and you don't want to scare them. But if you don't reach them by the time they're in 4th grade, and you don't tell them the dangers of cocaine or heroin or crack, you don't get in there with the down and dirty, with the hard drugs, with the Percocets, with the Oxys, with the Xanax, and you don't tell them the dangers of it, they're not going to know, and they're going to think that there's no harm in just trying it one time.
Right.
They don't realize that one time is all it takes. One time may take you. You don't know.
So don't start in the first place.
Yes.
What do you want parents to know,
Parents can't be afraid. They can't be afraid to let their children know. They can't be afraid to put it out there, to give them the talk, if they can't do it, make their doctors do it. Make somebody sit down with these kids and tell them. Eventually you're going to see in the schools, you're going to see them in 4th grade. You're going to see people like myself bringing the easel boards and the pictures, and we had a very normal family. There was no reason why either one of my daughters should have went off course. There is no reason at all whatsoever, other than the fact that they wanted to. And that's what happens.
Where it began, I'm sure they didn't contemplate the consequences of their actions. They didn't see
No.
where that was going to take them.
No, they
So
didn't.
no one told them? Outside of the home?
No, well, DARE was a big thing back then. And, 6th grade, but by 6th grade, you've already lost them. They've already smoked their pot. They've already, some of them have tried alcohol, and some of them think they're sneaky. And, girls are just as bad as boys. There is neither one. It doesn't discriminate. That's the thing.
And you're in National Park.
Yes,
National Park is...
We were in National Park, and now we're in Belmar, Camden County. But as in National Park, we had the smallest town in Gloucester County and the largest overdose death all the years that I lived there, from 1997 to 2006.
It's a tragedy, and it's getting worse, so we've got to talk more. We've got to talk more, come together. We'll be back, The Road to Recovery, right after this. Back on The Road to Recovery with Debra Banecker, and I always say recovery, there's a lot of different definitions of recovery. I mean, your husband, your grandkids, you're in recovery from the loss of loved ones, and
Yes.
That's something that we've got to talk about. How do you deal with that as a family?
Well, we just tell the kids that this is life, that their mommies are in heaven, that this is how it had to happen. Olivia isn't, young. Olivia's 19. She more or less gets it. Jada doesn't get it. Jada still wants to know if mommy's coming back. you know, and you have to be able to tell them straightforward and honest. I mean, the best thing with your kids is that you're honest and that you tell them that, no, mommy's not coming back.
Right.
You know, and as she gets older, she will understand, as a result of the actions that Kelly did, that she made it so she didn't come back. You know, as a result of the action, Sarah knew she was killing her immune system. She knew what she was doing. She was not stupid.
Right.
She knew that one day she would no longer be here. You know, and that's the sad part about it, that you don't want your children to die. No parent should ever have to bury a child. But as I get further and further into this, and I'm out there and I'm on social media, there's more and more parents burying their children. More and more parents stepping up and raising grandchildren. That's what's happening. That's the way the world is becoming. We have to find a way to turn it around.
Right.
There just has to be a way.
So we need to do everything. Policy changes, we need to educate our kids more, younger, educate families, you know, mandatory family meetings to understand addiction.
Yeah.
know.
And my worst fear is that Philadelphia gives them safe injection sites. You don't want that. You don't want them doing it. You don't want them doing it at all. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, here's two examples.
that-
Kelly and Sarah, wasn't an overdose. It was death as a result of the drug use. So safe
Yep.
injection sites every day. They still would have lost their battle. Deborah, I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Your strength, your mission now to educate the public.
Yes.
I'm Michael DeLeon. We'll see you on the next episode of The Road to Recovery.